Every piece of technology on that screen no longer exists the way it was. Most of it is gone entirely, but what people forget about are the behaviors these objects created. The habits, the reflexes, the expectations they wired into you, those never stopped. They just changed form. They moved into your pocket, onto your wrist, into the apps you open before you've decided to open them. You do things every single day that were invented by objects you haven't touched in 30 years. Here are 12 of them. The Sony Walkman. Before July 1979, music in public was something that happened to you. The shop chose what was playing. The car radio played what was on. The boombox on someone's shoulder told the whole street what they were listening to, whether the street wanted to know or not. Music was communal, inescapable, never entirely yours. The Walkman ended that. One pair of foam earpads pressed against your head, and for the first time in human history, you could be acoustically alone in a crowd, the director of your own film, moving through the morning on your own terms, your own soundtrack, your own private universe of one. Sony sold 200 million cassette Walkmans across 30 years, ending production in 2010 with a press release that most people never read on a Tuesday, almost without notice. But the idea never stopped. It moved forward, format by format, each one smaller and more invisible than the last. The Discman, the mini disc, the iPod, the iPhone, the AirPods now sitting in your ears so lightly you forget they're there. Each device a refinement of the same brief. Give one person their own sonic world. Portable, personal, utterly theirs. Every earbud pressed in on a crowded train, every playlist built for a walk you needed to take alone. Every signal sent to the world that says, not now. That's still the Walkman, still running, just wearing different clothes. What are you listening to right now? The Polaroid OneStep. Before the Polaroid, your photographs came back from the drugstore 3 to 5 days after you took them. Half hadn't come out, and the ones that had went into an album in order on a shelf. The photograph was a record, filed away, consulted on occasions, and already belonging to the past by the time you held it. The Polaroid OneStep changed that in 60 seconds. The image arrived while the moment was still alive. Warm, slightly chemical smelling, yours before the party was over. You didn't file it. You pinned it to a corkboard, tucked it into a mirror frame, stuck it to a locker door. The corkboard covered in Polaroids was the first social feed, curated, displayed, updated when something was worth remembering. Edwin Land said he wanted photography to be as convenient as a pen. Instagram made it as involuntary as breathing. The Polaroid brand filed for bankruptcy in 2001, but the behavior it invented, I want to see it right now. I want to share it immediately. I want proof the moment existed while I'm still in it. That behavior has never been more alive. Every selfie, every story, every photo posted before you've left the room. That's still the Polaroid. It just has more followers. When did you last wait for a photo to be developed? The VHS tape. Before 1977, television decided when you watched. 8 o'clock was when the show was on. Miss it, and it was gone into the air, unretrievable. The same way a radio broadcast disappeared the moment it ended. The VHS tape gave you your schedule back. Record it. Watch it when you're ready. You could watch Goonies 50 times if you wanted to. Build a library of films the way you built a collection of records, and then drive to a video store on a Friday night, browse the aisles, argue about what to bring home, order a pizza, and make an evening of it. Before the VHS tape, there was no such thing as a movie rental. A sentence that sounds impossible now, but the video store, the browsing, the negotiation, the occasion of choosing, was invented by a black plastic cassette and a machine with a clock nobody could set. When DVD arrived in 1997, VHS became extinct, but the DVD inherited every habit the tape had built. The shelf of films, the Friday night rental, the watching on your own terms, and simply removed the rewind. When TiVo arrived, it automated the time shifting without requiring a tape at all. Netflix turned into streaming, and it removed the disc, the shelf, the physical object entirely, until nothing remained of the original format except the demand it had created. Watch what I want, when I want, as many times as I want with no one else's schedule involved. The VHS tape is gone. The demand it invented is now the entire entertainment industry. What was your favorite Friday night rental? The Nintendo Game Boy. Before 1989, dead time was just that, dead. The backseat of a long drive meant staring out the window, the waiting room meant staring at the wall, and boredom was a condition you endured rather than a problem you solved. The Game Boy turned dead time into a destination. Not a distraction, but a place you could actively go with your hands and your mind working together that existed nowhere but in that gray plastic rectangle. The fields outside the window stopped being relevant. 2 hours passed and you looked up genuinely surprised that you'd arrived. Gunpei Yokoi built the Game Boy on a philosophy he called lateral thinking with withered technology, used cheap, proven components creatively rather than chasing the bleeding edge. His competitors built color screens that died in 5 hours. Yokoi built a monochrome screen that lasted 30 on 4 AA batteries. Philosophy beat specification, as it almost always does. Nintendo sold 118 million Game Boys and discontinued the original in 2003, but the compulsion it created never left. Nokia shipped Snake and the posture was identical. The App Store made the destination infinite. TikTok removed the threshold entirely. Every thumb moving on a screen in a queue, every app designed to fill the 30 seconds between one thing and the next. That's still Yokoi's brief, still being answered by devices he never lived to see. What was your favorite Game Boy game? The Motorola DynaTAC. Before September 1983, when you left the house, you left. Not hard to reach, not inconvenient to reach, but gone. The office couldn't follow you, your boss couldn't find you, and the evening was all yours, not because you'd negotiated for it, but because the on-call behavior didn't exist yet. Phones were attached to walls and you were not. The DynaTAC 8000X ended that. It was 2 pounds and 13 inches. Engineers called it the brick. It cost nearly $4,000, required most of a working day to charge, and gave you 30 minutes of conversation. And people queued for months to buy one because none of that mattered. What mattered was that you could make a phone call from a beach, from anywhere. Martin Cooper, the Motorola engineer who made the first call on the prototype in 1973, said the phone should be an extension of the person, not the place. And that single idea that a phone belongs to the human and not the wall was the most consequential design philosophy of the 20th century. The DynaTAC was a status symbol, then Nokia made it democratic, then the BlackBerry made you reachable by email, then the iPhone made you reachable by everything. The object that cost $4,000 and signaled membership in the global power elite is now given to a 12-year-old for their birthday. The architecture of human privacy that had been intact for all of recorded history ended on a Tuesday in 1983 with a product approval, and nobody was warned. When did you get your first mobile phone? The BlackBerry. The DynaTAC made you findable, but the BlackBerry made you accessible. Those are different things, and the difference matters. Being findable meant a phone call, an interruption you could hear coming, choose to answer, choose to ignore. Being accessible meant someone could reach into your pocket silently, leave a digital demand, and walk away. No ring, just a message waiting, patient, accumulating, and impossible to claim you hadn't seen. The BlackBerry arrived in 1999 with a full email client, a physical keyboard, and a red notification light that never stopped blinking. It became known as the Crackberry, checked compulsively and reflexively at dinner, in bed, on holiday, and at their children's school plays. Today, 76% of employees now check work email outside business hours, 40% open their inbox before 6 a.m., and the average person checks their phone 58 times a day. Behaviors that didn't start with the smartphone, but with a red light blinking in the dark from a BlackBerry in 1999. BlackBerry officially stopped making phones in 2022, and the company exists now only as a cybersecurity firm. But the expectation it created, that you are available always to everyone with no natural end, is more alive than ever. 14 countries have passed right to disconnect laws, making it illegal for employers to contact staff outside working hours. 14 countries had to pass laws to give people back what one device quietly took away. Do you check your email before breakfast? The answering machine. The answering machine invented something that sounds obvious until you think about it: the right to be unavailable. Before it existed, if you weren't home when someone called, the call simply didn't happen. No record, no message, no obligation. The phone rang into an empty room and the world moved on. The answering machine changed that by allowing someone to speak to you without you being present to receive it. And with that came a new social contract: the obligation to respond, the anxiety of the unheard message, the specific guilt of a blinking light you hadn't checked yet. It also invented the excuse: I was out, I didn't get your message. For the first time, unavailability had plausible deniability. The answering machine was killed not by a better answering machine, but by mobile phones that made the gap between caller and called disappear entirely. You're always near a phone now, so the excuse is gone. But the behavior kept evolving. The iPhone introduced visual voicemail in 2007, and for the first time, you could see who had left a message and what it was about without committing to listening to it. The act of screening, once only possible by hovering over the machine while the caller spoke, now became instantaneous, invisible, and entirely without guilt. The answering machine invented the unread message. The iPhone taught you to judge it before you heard it. We've never stopped being anxious about either. How many unread messages do you have right now? The Zenith remote control. This one never died. It just became invisible. In 1956, Zenith engineer Robert Adler built a remote control that worked by striking aluminum rods to produce ultrasonic sound. 4 buttons: power, channel up, channel down, and mute, with the mute button invented specifically because Zenith's founder believed commercials were destroying television and wanted to silence them from across the room. The first wireless remote was marketed explicitly as a way to shut off long, annoying commercials. That was the pitch, that was the promise, and it delivered. Then it delivered more than anyone expected. The remote control invented channel surfing, the restless, uncommitted, flicking through options that had never been possible when changing the channel meant walking across the room. It invented the couch potato and made passive consumption the default mode of television watching in a way that has never been reversed. It set a template that has never changed. You should be able to control your entertainment environment from where you're sitting, without effort, without moving, and the system should anticipate what you want next. That template runs through every streaming interface, every recommendation algorithm, every voice assistant that responds before you finish the sentence. You still mute the ads, you just do it with your thumb on a phone now. Zenith's founder would be pleased, and probably horrified by everything else that followed. Who held the remote control in your house? The mixtape. The Walkman made the cassette the dominant personal format, and that created something nobody had predicted. You could record your own album, from vinyl, from the radio, from other tapes, and carry it in your pocket. 90 minutes of music in the order you chose, your identity encoded in magnetic tape. And then you started making them for other people. The track listing written by hand on the insert card. The most personal gift you could give someone in 1985, costing 40 pence in 3 hours of your Saturday afternoon. The first song said something, the last song said something else, and everything in between was a conversation you couldn't have out loud. Napster killed the physical mixtape, iTunes killed it further, and streaming finished the job. But the impulse never died. Music as emotional communication, curation as an act of love, the playlist that says what words won't. It just moved to Spotify, where every shared playlist, every collaborative album, every song, quietly added to someone else's queue at 2 a.m. carries the same weight as that handwritten insert card. The mixtape is gone. The love language it invented is the most used feature on the most popular music platform on earth. Who was the last person you made a playlist for? 10. The Palm Pilot. The Palm Pilot didn't invent the smartphone. It invented something more specific, the idea that your entire professional life could be organized in a device that fit in your shirt pocket. Before 1997, personal organization meant a filofax, a paper diary, a Rolodex on a desk, information that was physical, location-dependent, and left behind when you left the building. The Palm Pilot put the address book, the calendar, the to-do list, and the notepad in your pocket and synchronized them with your computer when you docked it at the end of the day. Doctors used it for patient records, lawyers for case notes, executives for everything. For the first time, your entire professional life was portable. It sold 9 million units before being acquired by HP in 2010 and quietly discontinued. But what it invented, the expectation that your personal information architecture should be always with you, always updated, always synchronized, is so embedded in daily life that its absence is now unimaginable. Your iPhone is a Palm Pilot that also makes calls, plays music, takes photos, and watches you while you watch it. The device changed entirely. The behavior Palm invented in 1997 never did. The Kodak film roll. Before Kodak made photography cheap and simple, photographs were formal, expensive, and rare. Something professionals did, not something ordinary families owned. The Kodak Brownie, launched in 1900 for $1, put a camera in ordinary hands for the first time and made photography something you did yourself, about your own life, for yourself. But the roll of film came with a constraint that shaped everything. 24 or 36 exposures, each one costing money, none of them visible until you had the roll developed. So you had a mental pause before you pressed the shutter. You waited for the right moment, composed the frame, made the shot count. That constraint created intention and turned photography into a considered act rather than a reflex. Kodak invented digital photography in 1975 and buried the invention for 30 years to protect its film business. And by 2012, the company that had put cameras in everyone's hands filed for bankruptcy. Destroyed by cameras in everyone's hands. The constraint is gone now. Your phone takes photos infinitely, and for free, the average person has over 2,000 photos on their phone, and most will never look at the majority of them. The film roll is gone. The behavior of treating a photograph as something worth taking, that behavior went with it. Maybe that's the real loss. When did you print your last photo? The boombox. Every other object in this list created a private experience. The Walkman gave you solitude, and the Game Boy gave you escape. The boombox did the opposite. It declared your music to the world. A machine designed not to be personal but to be communal, carried on a shoulder, pointed outward, at maximum volume in the most public space available. Defiant, unapologetic. It said, "This is what we're listening to, and the street is going to hear it." The boombox became the hardware of hip-hop culture, the instrument that brought the music outside the club and into the streets, parks, parking lots, and subway platforms of New York. Without it, there is no hip-hop as a public art form, no breakdancing in a circle, no block party, because the culture needed a way to bring the sound to the people, and the boombox was that way. It's largely gone now, replaced by Bluetooth speakers that are smaller, more polite, less confrontational. But the impulse it represented, music as communal declaration, sound as social invitation, your taste made public and unmissable, runs through every outdoor speaker, every car with the windows down, every phone playing music on a train at a volume that's technically someone else's problem. The boombox said, "We're here." The Bluetooth speaker says the same thing, just slightly quieter. 12 objects, all of them gone or nearly, but the behaviors invented, all very much alive. The Walkman is in your ears right now. The Polaroid is in your camera roll. The VHS tape is in your streaming queue. The Game Boy is in your pocket. The DynaTAC is the reason your boss can reach you on a Saturday. The BlackBerry is the reason you check email before you've had coffee. The answering machine is the reason the unread notification makes you anxious. The Zenith remote is the reason you can mute the ads. The Mixtape is the reason you have a playlist for someone. The Palm Pilot is the reason your calendar is always with you. The Kodak roll is the reason, somewhere, dimly, you know a photograph should cost something. And the boombox is the reason music was ever anyone else's business. You do all of this because they invented it, they're gone. You're not. Comment "I see" if you made it to the end. Subscribe and become a member to support us. Thanks for watching.